My name is David Newman. I'm the president of the World Biogas Association, and it gives me the greatest pleasure to welcome you here on this beautiful sunny afternoon in London, and in the morning in Argentina, and in the evening in the east of Europe and the Eastern world, and in the morning in North America. Welcome, everybody. We have a little bit of housekeeping. Firstly, make sure your sound is turned off. So make sure you're muted so that if the dog barks or the children scream, we don't all hear it. Secondly, let me take an opportunity of thanking the companies who have sponsored this report, both Engie and Suez. They will be speaking later, and it's thanks to their contribution that we were able to do a lot of this research. Let me thank the speakers who are going to be here with us today, and particularly Alexandra Tomczak from the cabinet of the Executive Vice President Frans Timmermans at the European Commission. Welcome, Alexandra. Nick Primer from our own team, as well as Marta Camola Martinez and Amaya Arias Garcia from Engie and Suez, who are our sponsors. Let me thank the World Biogas Association staff and our members for having worked so hard over these months to put this report together, which we will present today. If you have specific questions on the presentations as they're being made, please put them into the chat box. And I know that Robert, who has organized all this brilliantly, will be following those messages and will ask me then to relay them to the speakers. This is an organization, ladies and gentlemen, which is entirely funded by contributions from members. And if you are interested in any way, shape or form around the biogas industry, I really strongly urge you all to join us and to get our messages across the world. What are these messages and what is the subject of the day? Well, I'm going to say rather provocatively that we're not going to talk about biogas. What we're going to talk today about is sustainable development. We're going to talk about climate change. We're going to talk about energy production and renewable energy production. We're going to talk about soil quality. And we're going to talk above all about waste management, because the report really highlights the enormous amount of biogenic wastes which are available in our environment today, go into our environment uncollected and untreated, and are available to be collected and treated to turn into resources for the development of a fossil fuel-free world. Biogas is here now. It can be used on its own. It can be integrated with other forms of vectors and energy production. Investors are here now, ready to and investing in the industry. Food waste, as Alexandra will no doubt point out, food waste collections across the whole of the EU are coming into force in just 3 years' time. So we'd better start planning, and we'd better make sure that that food waste goes into the right place, to AD and to composting. We have to also make sure as an industry that what we do right. And so we have to be absolutely spot on with the way in which we produce our energy, spot on with the way in which we get our outputs to soil to bring benefits to soil, and spot on when it comes to land use. Now, that's enough from me. Let me please introduce and welcome Alexandra Tomczak, as I said, from the cabinet of Vice President Frans Timmermans, who has really kindly agreed to be with us today, ladies and gentlemen, and to give us a keynote speech. Alexandra, welcome.
Good afternoon, and well, good afternoon or good morning, wherever you're joining from. It is my pleasure to give a keynote speech at the launch of the World Biogas report today. And I would like to start maybe by zooming out and talking first briefly about the European Green Deal, because with the European Green Deal, what we did at the end of 2019, when we first presented the European Green Deal to the world, was to commit Europe to be the world's first continent to be climate neutral by 2050. Back then, we were the only region in the world to make that commitment. Today, only slightly above a year later, the world has really changed a lot, because we see a lot of major economies joining us in these commitments. We have heard commitments from Japan, from China to be carbon neutral by 2060, South Korea. We are also expecting the United States to come forward with their own commitment next month at the summit organized by the US administration. So, of course, since we announced the European Green Deal, a lot of things have changed. The pandemic has covered the world, but nevertheless, EU leaders committed to making the European Green Deal a way out of the crisis, to base our recovery on green and digital transition, and to put a recovery fund which is going to be spent 37% of it on green transition. What we also have heard from our leaders in Europe in December last month is that in order to reach climate neutrality by 2050, they agree on reducing greenhouse gas emissions in Europe by at least 55% by 2030. And so now we are working on implementing this vision in practice. And of course, the energy sector is absolutely key. 75% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from energy consumption. 75% of the energy we consume in Europe is based still on fossil fuels, despite the big progress we have made. And even if we think about our future evolution, by 2030, we estimated that still more or less 50% of our energy will come from fossil fuels. But by 2050, the picture changes completely. By 2050, we have no more space for coal in our energy mix. We have a very marginal role for oil, almost zero role for fossil oil, and a very marginal role for fossil gas. Of course, the most immediate priority is to phase out coal, and this is already happening in Europe in a number of member states. Most of our member states have coal phase out commitments. But there are also some regions that are already phasing out from fossil gas as well. This is for the case of, for example, the province of Groningen in the Netherlands. They are already thinking about going out of fossil gas production, which was the core of the regional economy for a very long time, and to move to hydrogen economy. For those of you who have participated, who have listened to the annual meeting of Biogas last week, perhaps you have heard the executive vice president say in his intervention something that I think was very clear, that there is no viable future for fossil fuels, and that also goes for fossil gas in the longer run. Of course, in the transitional period, there will be uses, especially in areas such as heating, for fossil gas. So at the same time, we heard from the gas industry quite a strong commitment to decarbonizing the gas sector by mid-century, and also a clear message that this could happen not much later than 2045. So what are our priorities as the European Commission in the context of the European Green Deal to decarbonize the energy sector? The first one is energy efficiency first, as we call it, energy efficiency first principle, because the most sustainable form of energy, we say, is the one that we don't have to produce and consume. And that, well, also speaks to the concept of circular economy, which, as you know, is one of the bedrocks of the European Green Deal, and which I understand is a strong element of the report that biogas industry presents today. The second priority is electrification. We see that one of the most cost-effective ways to decarbonize a number of sectors is via electrification. And this is one of the key elements we want to see in decarbonizing the road transport, for example. But we cannot decarbonize everything via electrification and electricity. And this is where we need renewable and low carbon fuels, and especially renewable and low carbon gases to play a role. And the fourth element is a more integrated energy system, to make sure that the isolated systems that we see today, transport, buildings, industry, power generation, that they can all work together and we can have a better flow and also reuse of waste, whether they're waste, heat, or even, as you said, food waste. We could add it to the, well, maybe not energy system integration, but economy, the economy system integration more broadly. But I would like to pause on this third element that I mentioned, the decarbonization of gas. And we know that this is an absolutely important priority. We committed to decarbonizing the gas sector in the European Green Deal for a very simple reason. Today, gas fuels represent 25% of our energy demand. And even though fossil fuels will go down, gas fuels will stay as a form of energy. And our own models point to a share roughly of 20% of gaseous fuels that we would see in the system in Europe still in 2050. Well, of course, the options here, the two main options that we have outlined in the energy system integration strategy that we presented last year is hydrogen and biogas. For hydrogen, we had a dedicated strategy which we issued last year with a target to have 40 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity installed in Europe by 2030. Looking at the markets now, we think that we might even have been a little bit underestimating how much electrolyzers we can see installed in Europe. The industry is certainly very committed to deploying perhaps even much more. And we're also open to importing clean hydrogen from our neighborhood, whether it's the southern neighborhood or the eastern neighborhood, with very strong commitments that we have already heard from Morocco and Ukraine. And now, what is our policy response to facilitate the production and the uptake of hydrogen and biogas or biomethane? Here we see four elements that we would need. First of all, we need supply. Second, we need demand. We also need infrastructure and clear market rules. Let me maybe start with infrastructure, because this is where we have already made a proposal. Last year in December, we revised our flagship policy for energy infrastructure in Europe, the Trans-European Networks for Energy, so-called 10E. And as part of this proposal, this, for those of you who have heard about the 10E regulation, is the regulation that allows us to identify projects of common interest that we consider strategic for Europe, for the energy sector. And so we decided to remove fossil fuels from the scope of this policy. So natural gas and oil would no longer be eligible, but we decided to include hydrogen infrastructure and also to include smart gas grid infrastructure. And that would essentially allow for integrating decentralized production of clean gases, such as biogas and biomethane, into the European gas grid. So this we have already announced last year in December. Now we are moving to the legislative processes. So the Council and the Parliament, that are the two co-legislators that will start discussing this proposal soon. Now, the second point I wanted to make on supply and demand is on the Fit for 55 package. This is the package that we are putting on the table partly in June this year, partly at the end of this year, and these will be legislative proposals that will allow us to move the European energy system to where we want it to be in 2030, and then later on in 2050, leading to climate neutrality. And I think what we will be proposing there is quite in line with the recommendations that also your report is making, starting with the strengthening of carbon prices, because we have seen that carbon pricing is is the most effective way to deliver greenhouse gas emission reductions at the lowest cost possible for the economy. And thinking about the reform of the EU ETS, I think it can have major impacts also on the demand for biogas, because one of the options we are considering is to extend the ETS to building sector. Where, for example, in heating, gaseous fuels are extremely important. One of the second elements is the revision of the renewables targets, and here we are also now considering options how to support the uptake of renewable and low carbon fuels, including gases, when in the context of our renewables policy. Altogether, there are 12 elements to this Fit for 55 package. So just stay focused on the issues we're discussing today. I will not go through the whole package, but maybe jump to what we are also proposing in December this year, or at the end of the year, not sure yet whether that would be December or earlier, is the review of the gas market rules, our gas directive and gas regulations. And here, the objective is, there are two objectives really. First one is to enable the creation of a market for renewable and low carbon hydrogen. And the second is to facilitate the injection, transmission and distribution and trading of renewable and low carbon gases in the existing grid, such as biogas as well. On that last point, the public consultation was opened last week. We definitely count on the biogas industry to be an active participant in this consultation, to communicate your views on how biogas can help with the energy system transition, not only with this, but also to generate new revenue streams in the rural areas, because this is also the potential that we see in biogas production, that it can bring the benefits of the transition to climate neutrality to other parts of Europe, to take it outside of the industrial zones, outside of the wind parks, to really take it to the areas where we have a commitment not to leave anyone behind, and to integrate all the parts of the economy in this green transition. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to hearing the discussion, and thank you once again for the invitation.
Thank you, Alexandra. For everybody, the report and the summary of the report is now live on the World Biogas Association website, so you can go down, you can go and download it. For Alexandra, Robert, if there are questions, please signal them to me, but I have a specific question for Alexandra, and that is regarding the role of incineration in the European emissions trading scheme. As I understand it, so far the waste sector is excluded from the ETS. But there is a lot of pressure, I know, coming from groups, and I think most of our members would welcome that incineration is also considered within the ETS. Are you thinking on this, in these lines?
Yeah, so as I said, it's a little bit difficult to give very concrete responses right now, because just to a little bit, reveal what we are doing is we are finalizing our impact assessment. So this is where we are identifying all the options, what we want to do with the ETS, which sectors it should be covering, which installations, what size of installations. So all of these are now being considered, but I would say if the biogas industry has strong views on waste incineration, I would really like to encourage you to, if you haven't done so already, to let us know your recommendations, because this is one of the elements I didn't have time to talk about too much. But of course, circular economy and circularity is at the heart of the European Green Deal. So the way we reuse the waste, the way we limit the production of waste is central to everything we do, also in the energy sector. So I apologize, I cannot be more specific at this stage.
No, okay, we're in a period of policy development, we understand that, so thank you very much. Robert, are there any questions which I specifically should address to Alexandra?
Hi, David. I checked the Q&A. I couldn't see any new questions. Mostly people giving their shout outs from wherever they are around the world at this time.
All right, thank you. Well, then, Alexandra, can I thank you meanwhile? And if you are going to stay with us, please do, and I will come back to you with further questions as we go on. Now, we will get down to the body of the report, which is going to be presented now by Dr. Nick Primer. He is the policy and market analyst at the World Biogas Association, who has worked with lots of other colleagues and with lots of members to produce the report, which you are going to now present. Nick, over to you.
Hi, thank you very much. I'll just share my screen. So, yes, I hope everyone can see that.
Yes, that's fine. We can see. Good.
Perfect. Right. Thanks very much for the introduction. So, yep, as David said, I'm Nick Primer. I'm the policy analyst here at WBA. And today's just going to be a relatively quick presentation to really go through some of the key messages and the points from the report we're launching, Biogas Pathways to 2030. So to set the scene, there are over 105 billion tons of organic wastes produced from human activity each year. So this is an incredibly, this is a vast quantity of material. I mean, it's difficult to imagine, but it's estimated based on these 4 key organic waste categories. So there's food waste, there's sewage sludge, livestock manures and slurries, and crop residues. And for the most part, all of this material is being mismanaged. For example, 80% of the wastewater is returned to the environment untreated. And all this mismanagement is leading to some very serious, immediate environmental and socioeconomic problems. So as they break down and rot, they release methane, a potent greenhouse gas emission. And when all of this material is rotting untreated, we estimate that it contributes to about 5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And not only that, you know, these are contaminating freshwater systems, spreading disease, reducing biodiversity. They're emitting ammonia, harming air quality and harming public health. These are a real problem that must be tackled as soon as possible, immediately. So there's 2 things we can do or look to do to start managing these wastes and get on top of them. First is reduce it. The less organic waste produced, you know, the less, the fewer environmental impacts that they will have. When thinking about organic wastes, not all of them can even be reduced, or not by a sizable proportion. So humans will forever produce wastewater and sewage. You know, agricultural systems will forever produce manures and slurries and crop residues. So, so a lot of these are unavoidable, but it's crucial that these unavoidable and unpreventable organic wastes are recycled. So we estimate that we're unlocking just 2% of these bioresources' full potentials. You know, really harnessing the power of these organic chemicals and wastes and using them to our benefit. So we say that anaerobic digestion, or AD, unlocks the greatest value from these organic wastes. So crucially, they not only prevent that methane from getting emitted into the atmosphere and all the other harmful emissions and contaminations associated, you know, outlined in the previous slide, but it also delivers some new, sustainable, valuable products from their recycling, you know, such as biomethane and digestate and bio-CO2. You know, there's a whole range of valuable products. And together, when you combine the carbon savings from these 2 things, from the avoiding of methane and these new sustainable products, we estimate that we can deliver a 10% greenhouse gas reduction when treating these unpreventable organic wastes through AD. And then on top of that, by halving food waste, so food waste has a lot of room for reduction and reallocation. You know, that can also, on top of that, save a further 3% of greenhouse gas savings, in delivering a total of 13% on annual emissions. And on top of that, they also contribute to 9 out of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. You know, this is the clean water, sanitation, clean energy, energy security, all in all, supporting a more sustainable future for societies around the world. So what this report delivers is it first highlights the problems caused by organic wastes and the need to manage them, as outlined in the previous couple of slides. But more than that, it identifies the key barriers inhibiting the treatment and recycling of these organic wastes. You know, why aren't they being recycled already? What's stopping them? You know, what are those barriers? And then crucially, in response to that, what are the solutions? This report presents a toolkit for policymakers to improve organic waste management worldwide. So it's about identifying the value of these organic wastes.
Sorry, could I ask you please to mute your microphones? Thank you very much. Sorry, Nick, carry on.
That's okay, thank you. So yeah, it's about quantifying that value that they can deliver, understanding it, and then implementing policies to help overcome those barriers and deliver that full potential. So to build this report, we've gained insight and intelligence from numerous sources. First one being is it's been built on the WBA's past experience and knowledge base. You know, there's been extensive reports about biogas markets and anaerobic digestion around the world. You know, what wastes are being produced and how they're currently being managed and how that can be upgraded. And in particular, 2 years ago, the WBA released their Global Potential of Biogas report, there on the left. And that envisioned the world whereby all the wastes are being, all the unavoidable wastes are being processed through anaerobic digestion. And here it quantifies all of that energy it can deliver, that decarbonisation potential, and the nutrients recycled, etc. The WBA also launched a global survey to gather insight from experts from around the world within the biogas industry. Again, trying to fill that global picture and understanding of those barriers and solutions to waste management. So the survey itself was completed 83 times, 83 times from 37 different countries spanning 6 continents. So while there are some country gaps, you know, this really shows the width, the breadth of knowledge that we've sort of gathered through our, through this survey. And last but not least, you know, we've built this report has been compiled by a number of authors. So those in the WBA and also the WBA's expert working group, the Policy, Innovation and Technical Committee, the PITC. So this working group is a group of experts, again, from around the world in various different sort of subsectors within the biogas and waste management industry. And together their invaluable contribution has helped sort of develop this report. So I'd like to thank them. And I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Engie and Suez, who have sponsored the report and made this all possible. So the report itself is split into 7 chapters. First being the introduction and background. Much of that is setting that scene, you know, really highlighting the problem of organic wastes and what needs to be done urgently. Second is the world in 2030, the pathways to get there. So that envisions the world in 10 years' time where policy has effectively scaled up waste management worldwide. It quantifies all of those benefits that are on offer that can be delivered. And it also highlights some of those barriers preventing that growth and this, you know, the policy solutions that can help overcome those barriers. The report then breaks it down into the various sections within the sort of biogas supply chain. The first one being the international and national climate policy. So this is the role of, you know, these big institutions, whole countries, the EU, the UN, these big organizations, and how they can work together to, you know, solve global problems with global solutions, setting the targets to get the ball rolling and making sure that financial structures are in place to support the development. Chapter 4 is feedstock management and policy. So this breaks those feedstocks down into the food waste, wastewater, and agricultural wastes. And it looks at how policy can help encourage their collection, their separation, and treatment through optimal waste management technologies. Chapter 5 is digestate policy. So from the back end of AD, this renewable fertilizer, how can policy play a role in encouraging the uptake and utilization of digestate, stimulating its market demand and value in today's economies? Chapter 6 is biogas utilization policy. It's looking at how this really versatile fuel can be used and how policy can again adapt and see how biogas can solve different problems, whether it's decarbonizing your transport, or whether it could be small rural communities and using it as a clean burning fuel supply in a rural community. And then chapter 7 is the conclusion. So the report is called Pathways to 2030. And the emphasis being on pathways is that there's not one solution. There's not one size fits all, everything is going to be solved if you do this. It's a series of things where the whole supply chain needs to be considered. And every country in the world is going to be at a different readiness level to implement these policies recommended in this report. So broadly speaking, a country in the global north, let's say, might have a higher income and be better placed to start making these changes immediately. Perhaps they already have made some changes, some waste collection policy or set some strategic goal within their own country. Versus the global south, perhaps more needs to be done and they might need to learn from the mistakes of the global north. But either way, everyone should be looking to act immediately. And together with the right policies in place, over the next 10 years, we can deliver that 10% reduction to greenhouse gas emissions per year, just through AD, and then an additional 3% with waste management reductions. So here I'm going to present our overarching policy timeline. So as you can see, it's not a timeline in the traditional sense with the years on the bottom axis. This is instead that biogas industry maturity. So as I was just mentioning, everyone's on that different scale at a different place, but things can progress through. And it's not prescriptive, you don't have to do 1, 2, 3, but this sets about that motion of what can be done at first and how can we progress from there. So the first one here is the commitment to biogas in the nationally determined contributions. And we feel that every country is placed to do that, regardless of whether you're a global north, global south, where that focus, that can be achieved by everyone immediately. So there's this urgent need for decarbonisation, where the NDCs feed into the Paris Agreement and its goal of limiting global warming to 2 degrees within the next century. As you can see from this graph, the NDCs at the moment, even if they're attained, which most countries are off track, even if they are delivered, we're still not going to get sufficient decarbonisation to deliver the goals of the Paris Agreement. Far more needs to be done. And AD and waste management can play a real central role. So around 40% of that decarbonisation gap between the current NDCs and the 2 degrees C scenario can be delivered through effective waste management and recycling. So this map shows some of the countries that have already included AD or biogas within their NDCs. So there's just 24. Only 24 specifically mention AD or biogas and sort of broader waste management. Some of them are relatively strong, as signified in the dark blue, and some are still very positive, but perhaps less specific, with less detail in the lighter blue. But more needs to be done. Only 24. These account for just 10% of the global emissions. We need to get this to 100% with every country considering the role of waste management. The second policy recommendation in this overarching policy timeline is the transition to a more market-based policy support. So, as sort of alluded to previously, AD and effective waste management delivers a whole range of environmental, social, and economic benefits. Firstly, it generates renewable energy, as sort of previously discussed. It's a versatile fuel. Gas is a notoriously difficult sector to decarbonize. There aren't many technologies that are ready to use that produce a renewable gas. They provide baseload energy, balance the energy network, energy security. You know, all of these benefits are very valuable. The next is it produces an organic biofertilizer. So again, that recycling the nutrients, capable of displacing manufactured fertilizers, which require vast amounts of fossil fuels and energy to manufacture. They also require non-renewable resources like phosphorus mining. And also digestate can help replenish soil organic content, soil carbon. That's beneficial for the soil structure, you know, water retention, and also carbon sequestration in the soils themselves. AD can provide a source of bio-CO2, so for industrial processes in the manufacture of food and drink. But it could also be a source for carbon capture and storage, locking away biogenic carbon from the atmosphere such that it doesn't contribute to climate change. And also AD treats organic wastes. I mean, it is a waste management technology and it's often overlooked. You know, it prevents that contamination of the environment and supports public health. But at the moment, only that energy is really valued within most markets. Energy has a price, so it's quite easy to quantify it. And as a result, a lot of governments and policies really target that energy and put far too much focus in AD as a renewable energy generator. And really, we need to move to a system which recognizes all of these benefits and appropriately rewards AD for these environmental services. You know, and once all of these are accounted for, the economic model of AD deployment really makes sense. When things start to make sense, you're going to get more widespread deployment based on sort of commercial profitability, not just, these centers of waste management can provide these real benefits with value. And that kind of brings me on to the final policy recommendation, is the carbon pricing policy. So carbon is arguably the best way of quantifying all of these services delivered. AD delivers a low carbon waste management technology, which generates a low carbon energy and a low carbon fertilizer. You know, as well as more, you know, there's the biogenic CO2 and all of the others, but it's that carbon that kind of, accounts for all of these different services. And so any policy that starts to account for carbon in the system stands to benefit effective waste management, recycling, AD. And we've seen that already throughout the world, you know, these policies that have almost inadvertently stimulated AD development because of their focus on carbon. And when you compare AD against other renewable technologies such as offshore wind and solar PV, it really stacks up. The cost of decarbonisation is comparable, but it's not just about renewable energy, it's about this whole system approach and managing wastes in a sustainable fashion. So the report also presents these useful tools to enable any country, company, individual to start estimating the decarbonisation potential from their organic wastes. So here is the example for the food waste. So for 1 million tonnes of food waste, recycling through AD can deliver all of these nutrients and return them back to soils, create this much renewable energy, and together deliver this amount of decarbonisation. And as you can see, it's almost one-to-one. So 1 million tonnes of food waste results in almost 1 million tonnes of CO2 equivalents from emission saving. And this has been done for all of those feedstock types. So you've got your food waste, your wastewater, your farmyard manures, and your crop residues. So any country can, you know, estimate the amount of waste that they have available and then apply that to these diagrams and start coming up with these estimates for what they can deliver. So AD can become this carbon negative, when treating waste, AD is already a carbon negative technology. But when thinking about it in terms of carbon, AD can become this carbon hub, transporting atmospheric carbon, which is locked up in organic materials, then concentrated inside an AD plant. And then from there, the carbon can be effectively managed, providing those services, locking it in permanent storage, perhaps through CCS technology, or even just sort of making sure that soil organic content increases, sequestering that carbon underground. So to conclude, now is the time to act. Mismanaged organics wastes are a real global problem that need to be tackled immediately. We need to reduce the organic waste production where possible and recycle the unavoidable wastes. And if we do so through AD, implementing these AD plants capacity, we can deliver a whole range of benefits, from cutting global emissions by 10% or 13% with waste reduction, provide a third of global gas demand, restore soil, create 10 to 15 million jobs, stimulate trillions of investment, improve food and energy security, and so much more. The benefits are really broad ranging. And crucially, AD is ready to use. It's a future-proof technology. And as the UN FCCC have claimed, it's a win-win-win-win-win technology. I think that was 5. So yes, thank you for your time, and I hope everyone enjoys the report.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks very much. $100 trillion, I think, was perhaps 1 zero too many. $100 billion, perhaps you meant.
No, I think it's $1 trillion worldwide to scale up to tackle that 100.
$1 trillion worldwide, not 100 trillion. There were a few zeros too many, I think, in that last number there. But let's not worry about that. It's the real number is contained in the report. Fantastic, Nick. Thank you very much. Now, I know there are a lot of questions, but before we take them, I'm going to ask, please, the two sponsors. Firstly, we have, I think, with us Maria Carmona Martinez, who's the head of Biogas at ENGIE. Martha, if you are with us, please take the floor now, and 5 minutes from you, and then I will ask Amaya to join us afterwards. Thank you, Martha.
Okay, hi everyone. Good afternoon. So Marta Camora from ENGIE. I'm head of Biogas at the Corporate Strategy Department. I will be very brief. I just wanted simply to congratulate WBA for the job well done and the quality of the report. As ENGIE, we've been very happy to have sponsored and contributed to the work and to this publication. And I think it once again illustrates how important it is to support the development of biogas to ensure that our economies are decarbonized and sustainable. We know that there is substantial potential all across the globe for waste to be turned into biogas and biomethane, so that we can help abate carbon and contribute to the circular economy. And we also know, as the report highlights once again, that we need the right policy framework so that we make the right choices, the choices that are no regret options, actually. So, we all know the climate climate change is an urgency, and then different economies are stepping up their efforts. We see it in Europe in terms of the objectives of decarbonization. For instance, the intermediate decarbonization goals in Europe, which have been increased. So I think this report comes at a very good time to inform the debate and to contribute to the debate, be it at the policy level, policymakers level, but also the general public. And thus, I hope that it will reach as many recipients as possible. And that's it. Thank you very much, and have a good read to everyone.
Thank you, Marta, and thank you for your contributions to our organization as member of our council. And now welcome Amaya, who has worked for many years here for Suez in the UK, and I think now, Amaya, you are back in Europe, across the water.
Very soon, yes.
Very soon. Okay, good. Thank you, Amaya, and a few words from you, please.
Yes, I think I'll be a bit more extended. I'll speak a bit more. I think I'm famous for it, but First of all, thank you to the talented colleagues of the World Biogas Association for taking the lead on this report. Then I would like to say thank you also to my colleagues at the Policy, Innovation and Technical Committee for their work and for the fun that we had in helping to shape this report. It was a lot of fun, all the discussions. In the next minutes, I will like to talk about the benefits of AD, but in a slightly different way. There would be no point in repeating all the wonderful facts that Nick has given us, and the report is laying for all of you to read. But I think it would be good to talk about the benefits it provides in raising awareness about resource utilization in the most circular way. Anaerobic digestion is a humble process, and it's a humble process that extends the life of organic materials by converting them into another product. Even in an ideal world where climate change didn't exist, utilizing anaerobic digestion to extend the life of organics would be a no-brainer. And I repeat, extending the life of organics, of organic waste, why wouldn't you? But to me, there is a deeper benefit. AD is a good connecting story. Nowadays, there is a huge disconnect between our lives, which in general are full of convenient products, and where everything comes from. I realize this doesn't happen to all the areas of the world, but it does in most urban areas. We are disconnected from where our food comes from, disconnected from where our energy comes from, disconnected from the health of our soils, of our water resources. And this disconnection makes us lazy when it comes to showing respect for the natural resources. I think anaerobic digestion gives us an opportunity to connect and to show respect for those resources. And it is an opportunity also to close the circle. It provides an opportunity to, or a platform to re-educate ourselves about food production, nutrients, soil health, energy efficiency, water utilization. It is a nice story that should be taught at the schools. Of course, all these benefits will not be true if we don't do it right. It would only be true if we develop AD correctly. And how do we do that? Well, for anaerobic digestion to be successful, it needs to be developed with a purpose. It is almost a sin in a capitalist society to say that the purpose can not be to make money. We all need to make money in our business, right? However, I have seen too many businesses making mistakes while developing AD because they focus purely on the short-term economic benefits, not taking into account the long-term benefits. We need education at all levels, to combat this colossal lack of vision. Without this, AD will be deployed wrongly and will not deliver its full potential. I would love to see AD included in the school curriculum. Governments around the world should adopt anaerobic digestion as one of the technologies to treat every bit of organic material like sewage, industrial effluents, organic fraction of household waste, and agricultural manures. They should, in parallel, produce a pathway to ensure that these facilities are deployed based on environmental benefits, and then provide a framework for them to be operated in a financially positive way. The Pathways to 2020 report aims at helping to achieve this goal. And why do I say that the government should act? Because we are running out of time. Because despite all the talk about climate change, the problem is not being treated like the emergency that it is. Because we should use every process, every process that is or has the potential to contribute towards our objective, which at the moment is keeping global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees C. The beauty of ID to me is that it tackles not only the problem, but also tackles the root cause of the problem by connecting, by raising awareness, not only so not only we treat the waste as a product, but also we avoid the waste in the first place. In summary, for me, the report aims to provide policymakers worldwide with a toolkit of policies. It's a toolkit to think. It details the environmental and socioeconomic benefits, as Nick said, available for the recycling of organic waste through AD, and then identifies how policy can encourage the updates of AD to tackle key issues. So I really hope you enjoy it, and at least it makes everybody think. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for that, Amaya, because that is a very insightful few minutes of discussion from you, and brings us to thinking about the connectivity between the ways in which we act that we hadn't perhaps given the right attention to. So thank you, and thank you very much for your contributions to this report over time. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a few more minutes. We have 240 participants. I welcome Her Excellency, the Ambassador from Nicaragua, who is here with us. Your Excellency, if you'd like to say a few words, you are most welcome. And anybody else who wishes to to speak, now is the time to do so. Robert, are there any specific questions that we need to ask any of the speakers? Her Excellency, thank you. Grace.
Thank you. Thank you for the organization and inviting me to participate in the launch of this report. I think it gives a very comprehensive, even me that I'm not an expert, I've been following the discussion, and it really gives a very good insight. I just wanted to also mention that as a country, we have been transforming the energy matrix using all the renewable resources that we have at our disposal, which are, very extensive. At the moment, we are producing 80. Last week, for example, Clean Energy 2021 highlight that 88% of our energy was coming from renewables. One of in terms of biogas, of the use of biogas, it has been increasing the participation of biogas, particularly coming from sugarcane. The mills, they are auto-sustainable in terms of energy, but they are also selling energy from biogas to the general matrix of the country, to the general grid. Sorry. So I think even small countries and developing countries can, if they have the will, if there is a will and there is a program, a long term, a long view, and conscious of that this could help to reduce to fight the climate change. I think is something that other countries, small countries, also can do too. That's a proof. Also, in just recently this year, I just want to share with you, there is an investment of $500 million. Maybe this doesn't sound that big for big projects, but for Nicaragua, this is the first plant that we're going to have. It's a natural gas that will it's an investment from the North American company called New Forest Energy, and will put the aim is to generate 300 megawatt and send it to use it in the matrix. So in general, the message from you is to see a long term. And I think when you as a country look at long term and look for the right investors and use and realize that you have the resources, the natural resources, and exploit them in a very sensible way, there is a possibility to change the matrix for everyone. Every country can do it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for that encouraging message, Ambassador, and thank you for joining us today. Robert, I am in difficulty here reading the dozens and dozens of messages while I'm talking here, but are there any questions that you would like to highlight?
Sure, quite a few questions. One from Dominique Demessence. She asks, in the report, do you consider how to attract investors to biogas facilities financing?
Yes, so I think that comes in with the sort of, there are these vast quantities of money available from some development funds, particularly international funds from from different banks, investment funds, and with the increasing sort of focus on sustainable investment and green investment, this is where a lot of the money can come in from, and that can complement national policies to set tariff rates or encourage the uptake of the use of its products, whether it's through a tariff rate or through obligations. There are various different mechanisms to sort of promote the use of its products, and that can help drive that revenue into an AD plant and stimulate that deployment. But there's
I would add, sorry to interrupt you there, Nick, I would add that one of the key outcomes that we hope to get from COP26 this year is the approval of the Article 6. And the Article 6 is the financing mechanism. And if that approval is made and countries sign off on that, that unlocks the potential for $100 billion a year investment from developed to less developed countries around the world. So I think that the critical moment of approving the Article 26 this year will see a dramatic step change in finance flowing to renewable energy.
Excellent. And we have a question from Adriano Gentilucci. He says, how do we see in recent news of oil companies such as Total and Eni buying biogas companies? Can we expect a scale up of biomethane project size?
It's an interesting one. I think, again, it comes back to the adaptability of biogas. So where it makes sense to scale up and produce these very sort of almost energy centers, where the focus is very much on biogas, that might form a role and play a part in the sort of broader scheme in different places, but it's not going to be the answer to every country in the world. So certainly it will play an important part, but also, we mustn't forget about the smaller communities that are sort of deploying more circular systems within a discrete community. So it's kind of a bit of a get out. I think there's going to be lots of solutions, and that is going to be inevitably one of them. These large companies are.
Could I turn that question over to Ole? Ole, you're there in Denmark listening to us at Nature Energy. Well, I know you're looking and working on such agreements with some of the oil majors.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to elaborate a little bit on this. I think that it's important that we get the large-scale biogas all the places that we can do that, because that will improve the economy of scales when we build large biogas plants. But of course, that will also call for more financing. And what we are doing is to find places where we have the support from governments to subsidize biogas in the first place, and to build large-scale biogas plants. And we'll also make sure that we have the financing, because that's a part of our business model. So we have a build, own, and operate model, and we are able to finance our projects both by our own equity, but also from bank financing and from institutions, government institutions for financing. So I think it's important that we really raise the ambitions and make sure that we do it as energy centers all the places, at least in Europe and in North America. And I'm sure that's other places in the world that this wouldn't work, but I think that we need to make it to a real big scale industry. This.
Thank you, Ole. Jorge Hilbert down in Argentina. Jorge, can I ask you to give us a perspective here from Argentina, from Latin America? You have to unmute.
Yeah, sorry. That was surprising, David. Thank you. I think the perspectives are very variable according to the different countries. As you probably know, our countries are going into a very, very deep depression now, and the COVID situation added to it. And so I am very worried that some governments are shifting again into fossil alternatives in order to reduce the prices of energy and see how they cope with this crisis in their internal economies. So that's the situation now. I think we are not moving in the correct direction in many countries in Latin America at the present stage, and there is a big struggle and battle in the parliaments, in the executive governments in each country, with these strong movements to what you mentioned, the long view or the very short view, and the urgency. I think we are in the middle of the fire, and the firemen are in the house breaking everything, and you have very little time to talk about projections when this is occurring in the country. So that's the present situation. I regret that that's the reality we are having now.
Thank you. No, it's important to understand that, because otherwise we give ourselves an impression that everything is happening and everything is running smoothly. But actually, ladies and gentlemen, it's very difficult. Robert, are there other questions, please?
Yes. So on the topic of scale, we spoke about large scale a moment ago. Mike Woolcott has another question from a different perspective. He asks, where should emphasis be made to small scale, for example, farm scale, local AD networks, or large scale industrial scale AD? Is there sufficient support for farm scale AD? And should there be some more encouragements for local circular economies?
Nick, do you want to take that up?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's where it comes in again, is recognizing all of the different the outputs of AD and particularly the benefits that could bring to the user. So a small scale agricultural unit might be supplying manures and slurries, but these are actually quite low biogas yielding feedstocks compared to perhaps food waste. So if you're not going to be producing vast quantities of biogas, it puts that extra emphasis on the need to acknowledge and recognize the value of the other things. So a small scale farmer can save a lot of money by not needing to buy in as much, if any, artificial fertilizers to fertilize their crops. There's value in that. There's also value in improving that organic content. So agricultural productivity generally increases with greater levels of organic carbon in the soil. So again, you're sort of getting money back through and encouraging that kind of circular economy of agricultural products. I think as well, when carbon is accounted for as well, is the most common practice for manures and slurries is just to store it and then spread that manure back to land untreated. So there's a huge amount of greenhouse gas emissions from that manure storage. And then there's further environmental problems such as ammonia when that manure is returned to land. So AD can really, manage all of these things. And if, so as well in California, their kind of carbon accounting scheme, for example, has stimulated the growth of manure-based biogas because the carbon intensity of that biogas is negative. It's the only technology within their scheme that delivers that carbon negative energy source. And so again, from accounting that carbon, all manner of setups can be rewarded through the treatment of these wastes.
We're privileged at one of the COP meetings to meet a group from the group of countries from the Sahel region. And some of you may know that the Great Green Africa Wall is being built from Senegal across to Ethiopia. with hundreds of millions of trees being planted. And the fertilizer for many of those plantations is coming from the digestate from local biogas units. And some of these units are no bigger than 2 or 3 households or small farms. And we see across the planet that there are tens and tens of millions of these small scale units, very cheap to install, very easy to run, and gives local energy and local nutrients, particularly in the more desertified areas. Robert, next question.
Amir Akbari from Anessa asks, is there any information around the innovative technologies for biogas facilities in this new report? Or is the report only focusing on the policy side of the industry?
Yeah, it's a good question. It is very much focused on the policy side, but it's a very good point to raise actually. So a lot of the modeling is based on current technology, readily available current technology, and with that, it produces these very significant results. But as that kind of question alludes to, technology is only going to improve and optimize these systems. So it could be seen that 10% emission savings is almost the bare minimum. As we improve and optimize these systems, it's only going to increase. So yeah, it's definitely something that needs to be considered. But yeah, no, this report is mainly on the policy side.
Yeah, and let me add, if I may, to that, Nick, that the World Biogas Association is a technology neutral association. We don't promote any particular technology over anybody else. Robert, next question.
Thomas Minter from Malaby Biogas asks, do you think there is scope for trading green credentials on carbon markets to raise finance?
Yeah, I certainly think so. And I think that's going to be one of the, has the biggest potential when carbon has a value. If that value can be, received by the AD plant, yeah, it's going to revolutionize the financial model. So it's not just about energy, it's about all of these services, best surmised by carbon. Yeah, I think there's a huge potential for carbon.
Thomas, we're already today at $50 a ton of carbon, €45 a ton, and it's only going upwards. And as the emission trading scheme comes into force here in the UK, and it's come into force, of course, in Europe, and it's being revised, I think that market is going to help this industry and, generally speaking, the recovery of biogenic waste altogether. Which is why I asked the question about incineration, because if it's still cheaper to burn and the incinerators are not subject to that carbon taxation, then we have a bit of a problem. Robert, next question.
Davi Cavalcante asks, what are the existing optimized biogas technologies for electricity generation used for small communities?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
Sure. What are the existing optimized biogas technologies for electricity generation for you?
I'm going to interrupt you there, Robert and Nick, because I'm not going to take that question because it's not relevant at this stage to the report, which, as we said, is a more policy-driven report. And maybe we can come back to that question in writing.
Sure. Yep.
Next, please.
Question is if this is the right, Andrew Wood asked basically, what are the barriers to overcome to achieve this potential? Is it cost, regulation, lobbying?
Yep, that's a very good question. So that's something that's particularly our survey got us some really interesting insight to that. Number one is by far finance. That is the biggest barrier. So as I kind of mentioned, there's cheaper technology. So if you only care about disposal of waste, then landfill is a cheaper way of doing it. I mean, it's completely unsustainable and has costs further down the line, but you're trying to make a case to spend money to do things the right way. And I think for that is cost is definitely the biggest barrier. And that's why there's this thread through the entire report, is when you start accounting for all of those services, the costs begin to make sense. One of the second thing is sort of competency and understanding. Is, you know, we need to get people need to understand what biogas is, what AD is, what it does, how it works, and that comes through education and things. So it's a bit like, you know, going off what Amaya was saying as well, getting it into the curriculums, but also having sort of training programs and systems in place worldwide to make sure that people are doing this in the best possible way. And then, yeah, there are more barriers that the report goes into a lot about, you know, how are wastes collected. You know, if, for example, food waste requires, or in an ideal world, has that separation aspect. When you collect the separated food waste and building up the infrastructure around getting those feedstocks to the right place. So yeah, they're probably the top three, but that third one can really be broken down into many different aspects, particularly when looking at the different types of feedstock.
Thanks, Nick. Robert, one last question, because I realize we're now at 3:40 London time, and I guess people have other things to do this afternoon. I'm sure we could stay here for another 2 hours, but if there is one last pressing question which you think is of interest to our global audience, please, let's ask it now.
Sure. Duarte Ferreira asks, should there be harmonization of tariffs for biogas within the EU and between the numerous countries? Would this normalize and speed up the process?
Yeah, so an interesting one. Yeah, I think certainly to answer that question in a slightly different way, I think international cooperation is key, and making sure that you're never incentivizing unsustainable practices inadvertently. So we don't want to see, you know, if one country in the EU, for example, has a strong tariff, we don't want it to be so strong that it incentivizes the importing of wastes across countries just to be processed and access that tariff. You know, that's not sustainable. That's not the objective. So some level of cooperation internationally is really important, making sure that the waste is managed in the most efficient way possible, and you're not just sort of farming the incentives. But we also have a whole range of experience we've learned from. You know, the biogas industry now, on a global sense, is decades old, and we've learned over time the policies that lead to these you know, far from ideal practices. So that kind of international cooperation is important, and try and deliver the collective goal.
Yes, of course, one of the problems with tariffs, Nick, is that each country fixes its own taxation systems, and it's difficult for national governments to give those up and let somebody else fix taxation systems for them. They're very reluctant to do that. And that's why we have different price mechanisms in different countries. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to bring the meeting to a close at 3:45. Let me once again thank the sponsors. Let me above all thank Nick Primmer and his team, excellent team at WBA, having presented the report, Robert for having organized it. Some people are saying disappointing you didn't reply to all the questions there, but we will get back to you on some of them that we can answer. Some of them may be inappropriate for this. And thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are in the world, for listening in. The report can be downloaded from the WBA website now. Please distribute it. Once you've read it, please send it to your policymakers in your countries, and please join us in our work for a better world. Thank you very much to everybody.